Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. The trial for doomsday cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell continues today. After being dark on Friday in Boise, Idaho, the 49-year-old is charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and other counts over the deaths of her 16-year-old daughter Tylee Ryan and her 7-year-old son JJ Vallow. And of course, we can't forget she is also charged in connection with her husband Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, on Thursday, we heard a range of testimony from the sergeant who responded to the scene where Charles Vallow was shot and killed, to JJ's babysitter and his principal, to Melanie Gibbs' husband. Thankfully, we have our own GiGi McKelvey, who is in the courthouse. She is outside the courtroom right now. She has been our eyes and our ears. She has soaked in every moment, every detail for us. Good morning, GiGi. Good to see you.
Good morning, Jesse.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Thursday. Before we even get into what we can expect in week 3, before we can even expect today, talk to me about what we learned on Thursday.
Thursday, people were up and down off that stand quickly. In fact, we ran out of witnesses, which is why court was dark on Friday. The trial's going much faster, but we started off with Detective Nathan Moffett, who originally was the lead investigator into the murder of Charles Vallow. He was promoted, and there was a new lead investigator appointed in 2021. But he walked through some things, just some inconsistencies they found, which was the small laceration on the back of Alex Cox's head, Alex Cox being Lori's brother, who shot and killed Lori's husband, Charles Vallow. Charles was a very athletic man and a semi-pro baseball player, so if Charles had hit him in the head with the bat, it would have probably knocked his head off his shoulders. Then we heard from the babysitter that Lori hired as soon as she came to Rexburg, as well as the principal. And what the defense, I think, was trying to do is show that Lori was looking long-term for JJ. Getting a babysitter, saying that would be ongoing, as well as the principal, there was no indication this was going to be a short-term stay. So they're kind of chipping away at a little thing, a little reasonable doubt in there. And we finished off with David Warwick.
Okay, a bunch of things to break down there. First, I'll let everybody know, with respect to Charles Vallow, this jury is not going to have to decide whether or not she is guilty of conspiracy to kill Charles Vallow, her former husband. That will be up to an Arizona jury. This is, my understanding, is being introduced to show a common scheme or plan, that the same way what she allegedly did with Charles Vallow is the same thing that she did with the kids and Tammy Daybell. When anybody got in their way, their religious beliefs, who they thought was a dark spirit, this is another example of that. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you mentioned with respect to the babysitter and the principal. You mentioned what the defense did. What did the prosecution do with these witnesses? Because it was my takeaway, if we're trying to understand, did Lori have knowledge about what happened to the kids? And if she had knowledge, maybe you could equate that she was part of the plan to kill them. What were some of the biggest takeaways from the babysitter and the principal that Lori was the mastermind or was behind what happened to these kids?
The big thing with the babysitter is that she thought this would be ongoing, and she texted Lori and didn't get a reply for about a month. And at that time, Lori Vallow told the babysitter that JJ was going to stay with his grandparents in Louisiana for a month, which we know was a lie. Also, with the principal, just that he was never given any indication that this would be short. That he thought JJ would finish out the school year there. And so it really was more on the babysitter telling that very elaborate lie. Oh, with the principal, that he was told that JJ was going to be homeschooled with a relative that also had special needs. But this was actually the day on the 24th, the day JJ was being buried, is when she called this school and said she was pulling him out and homeschooling him. Of course, they never had any requests for records, and it's just part of that common thing with Lori, where she's telling lies to cover up what she obviously knew was a crime.
Okay, so that's clearly what the prosecution wants the jury to believe. I just want to ask you real quick, the only way I think you could spin it is saying, well, maybe she lied about what happened to the kids, or she lied about where the kids were going, because she herself was being deceived by Chad Daybell or Alex Cox. Have we heard any evidence of that whatsoever?
You know, I'm surprised at the lack of throwing under the bus. Is what she's known for. Every ex-husband, every friend that just became useless to her, they became victims of her in a way. And there was a couple of mentions of Alex, you know, with the shooting of Charles. But for the most part, she has not thrown either one of them under the bus. And I'm surprised with that, to be honest.
I have my own theories about that, but I will move on because you mentioned David Warwick, who is still the current husband of Melanie Gibb, who was, arguably one of the state's star witnesses. This is the person, Melanie Gibb, who told this jury that Lori Vallow asked her to lie to police about JJ's whereabouts. So David Warwick takes the stand. What were some of the big takeaways from his testimony?
Well, he was one of the last people to see JJ alive the night we believe JJ was murdered. He was in Rexburg with Melanie Gibb, who was his boyfriend at the time, just visiting and going to a conference that was nearby. So he recounted the last night he saw him with JJ asleep. Alex was holding him. JJ had his head on his shoulder. He tried several times to connect to JJ. JJ just didn't acknowledge him. And the next morning, of course, as they're leaving, and at this point, unfortunately, JJ's been murdered, Lori was saying that he was climbing on top of the cabinets, knocking over pictures of Jesus. David thought it was odd because he didn't see any scuff marks. The other thing that's very odd is that a group of them went to visit a piece of property that Chad wanted David to build on. David Warwick is a general contractor. And Chad looked over in the distance and said, "Do you see that temple-looking building?" And David Warwick said, "No, I don't." So, we all kind of got a little giggle. It reminded me of those 80s posters, where you had to concentrate real hard. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. But everybody in the courtroom was kind of looking at each other. The jury almost looked amused at that one.
So again, it goes back to this theory of the visions and what were they really believing. Two things I want to ask you about David Warwick. Didn't he say that Chad told him something very eerie about Tammy Daybell before she died, which I think is pretty incredible? And two, did the defense try to suggest that David Warwick is not believable because he might have these kinds of beliefs?
Well, with regards to Tammy Daybell, David Warwick saw the affection between Lori and Chad, knowing Chad was still married, and asked him, "How's your wife?"
Yeah.
And Chad said, things were going good, but he didn't think Tammy would live much longer. He always said that he told Julie Rose she would not live to be an older woman. And I think what the defense is trying to do with David Warwick is they introduce some really out there theories that he had about the government and thinking that different countries are going to take over America and beat us in 3 days. So some pretty extreme beliefs were brought up that have nothing to do with the trial, but I also think were put out on that podcast. So just to maybe discredit him a little bit.
Yeah, and by the way, in a conspiracy case like Lori Vallow, in order to be found guilty of conspiracy to kill Tammy Daybell, there just had to be some agreement. So assume there was some agreement between her and Chad. If Chad, one of the participants of this conspiracy, takes an overt step in furtherance of that, Lori Vallow could be found guilty. So it's interesting to hear what he does with respect to Tammy Daybell, what he said. Now, let's talk a little bit about one thing we haven't mentioned, the body cam footage that was played for this jury. Walk us through that.
Yeah, we've heard the audio before. That's been circulating for quite a while now, but the body cam footage was different. And what stuck out to me the most, Jesse, is the difference in how Lori
GiGi,
reacted.
what was it? What was the body cam footage? Let's talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got way ahead of myself. So the body cam footage was for the welfare check on JJ Vallow that the grandmother, Kay Woodcock, called in. And they went back a couple of times. Initially, they approached Chad and Alex, who were outside. When asked where JJ was, the two of them just looked at each other and were silent. However, on that body cam footage, when they walk in the door, although Lori looks very closed off, kind of with her arms folded, very assertive, very sure in the lies she was telling, she didn't stumble. So when it came to outright just telling a tall tale, she had those boys beat by a country mile. She didn't miss a beat. And it was enough to get the cops to leave and say, "Hey, can you get in touch with Melanie Gibb for us and have her call us?" That's how much at the point they believed her.
Well, I'll tell you, that was week 2. Now we're in week 3. What do you expect today, and what do you expect for the rest of the week?
Well, the witness list is sealed. It seems like some of these important witnesses, I'm waiting to hear from Melanie Pulowski, who I call Melanie's to keep my Melanie straight. She's going to be a big witness. Lori was like a mother to her. This is the first time they've seen each other in a while. We still have not heard about cell phone pings. We have not heard from the pathologist, the medical examiner. So we still have some big testimony yet to be heard. And so just like you guys, I'm interested to see who's up on that witness stand first thing this morning.
Yeah, let's just clarify that real quick. So it seems to me the prosecution's case has mostly built upon odd statements of Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell, the timeline of events like them getting married 2 weeks after Tammy dies, you know, that seems to be the crux of the case. In terms of hard, cold forensics, do we anticipate a lot of that in this case or no?
No, because that was one of the main things they questioned jurors on during jury selection is, can you convict on circumstantial evidence, which leads me to believe they probably don't have any DNA evidence tying her to the actual murders or burying of the bodies. However, I've heard there's a lot of digital evidence in this case, as we saw in the murder of Charles Vallow. They didn't hide it. So I think maybe that's going to come in when we get to Tammy Daybell's murder, in that some of these text messages back and forth between the group might have shown she was an active part of the conspiracy.
And let's not forget, she doesn't even have to be present at that crime scene. She didn't even have to carry out the murders to ultimately be found guilty of not only conspiracy to commit murder, but also murder, first-degree murder. So encourage everyone to check out the indictment. You can take a little bit more look at that and understand the law of it. But GiGi, excellent reporting as always. I know you have to head into that courthouse, and you are, once again, our eyes and ears. We really appreciate it, GiGi.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, everybody. So GiGi's going to go back in the courthouse. She's going to come out later. She'll check back in with us, give us what's happening in that trial. But that is all we are going to cover right now on Lori Vallow Daybell. We're going to take a break. I'm going to sign off. But when we come back, we're actually going to switch gears to another trial where the mother is accused of murdering her son. Just a wild, really disturbing case. It's the Letitia Stout case. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back right after this.